What question?
Sorry, this is the first time I've been a head judge. This is our first classroom. We are going to go with question number 2. Question is, how and why has presidential power expanded since the ratification of the Constitution? How have wars, emergencies, and the media contributed to the expansion of presidential powers? How have other branches of government responded to the expansion of presidential power? Do you think they have done so adequately? Please explain.
Prior to President Barack Obama's immigration order, House Speaker John Boehner stated, "The president has said before that he's not king and he's not an emperor, but he sure is acting like one." While this has been a common theme throughout presidential history, there's been no linear growth to the constitutional powers of the executive, rather an expansion of executive responsibilities. The vesting and take care clauses of Article 2 grant strong implied powers, allowing the president to adopt unforeseen responsibilities, to take responsive and effective actions for situations such as secession, natural disasters, or controversial laws of the war on terrorism.
The most influential executives embody this responsive energy, taking advantage of opportunities to exercise these responsibilities. This is often through executive orders, which carry quasi-legislative functions and grant the president discretion in how to faithfully and responsibly expedite legislation. Wars and emergencies create a political or economic environment calling for efficient and responsive execution by a president as opposed to by a slow, deliberative, or partisan legislature. The framers were aware of this from the Articles of Confederation, where Congress could not efficiently command the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War.
This inefficiency made many advocate for a more functional, energetic executive to respond to such situations. This allows for presidents to implement their policies, such as Franklin Roosevelt, who faced crises like the Great Depression and World War II and issued 3,522 executive orders. The versatile presidency has the ability to respond to circumstances unforeseen by the framers, such as the nuclear age, where President John Kennedy used his commander-in-chief powers to quickly and safely resolve the Cuban Missile Crisis. This presidential efficiency is still needed for emergencies, such as the Ebola crisis, where President Obama issued an order appointing a federal Ebola czar to oversee national coordination.
The president's unitary position, as opposed to that of a diverse Congress, has always allowed them to capitalize on media to advance their agenda to more demographics. President Theodore Roosevelt's critics deemed this influence the bully pulpit for its power to sway public opinion. The internet, social media, and television have offered new mediums for expanding this presidential privilege. President Obama has capitalized on this through his weekly YouTube chats and interviews. Media also allows other influential Americans to promote presidential agendas, such as will.i.am, who produced a song using the transcript of President Obama's Yes We Can speech, which was viewed over 26 million times during his campaign.
As presidential authority has expanded, Congress has been reactionary and public opinion has been in their favor. The 1973 Wars Power Resolution was passed in reaction to the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, in an attempt to regain congressional war power during the Vietnam conflict. The House of Representatives recently filed a suit against President Obama's unilateral action under the Affordable Care Act, which they believe was without congressional or public approval.
The Supreme Court's crisis jurisprudence has shown a power of oscillation for its presidential power. During the Korean War, President Harry Truman issued Executive Order number 10340, illegally taking control of the nation's steel mills, resulting in Justice Robert Jackson's concurrence from the case of Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company versus Sawyer, establishing a system to monitor presidential action.
President George W. Bush implemented unitary executive theory, allowing all executive power to the president. However, the 2006 case of Boumediene versus Bush showed the court it is more likely to examine the constitutionality of presidential actions after the public safety has been assured. While Congress ceding some of its powers may be justified by the increased need to implement legislation, we must balance our desire for efficiency with our need for democracy.
While increased presidential responsibility is appropriate in our increasingly complex world, when Congress cedes certain powers to the executive, it must respond with greater oversight to retain the framers' intention of checks and balances. Legislative and judicial branches that assert themselves as a co-equal branch of government would not necessarily weaken this presidency, but strengthen our democracy. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. For the first question, how can public opinion affect presidential power?
The president is able to not necessarily listen as closely to the public opinion as, for example, the House of Representatives, who are very directly connected to the people through the states. But the president is able to, through media, get his influence out, and therefore he can get feedback back through the people.
President Abraham Lincoln once said, "Public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed." I think this certainly emphasizes the idea that public approval is very important to the presidency as a whole.
Going back to my colleague Sophia's point on presidents using the media, this often being the bully pulpit because the president has a sort of power over public opinion that Congress doesn't, because the president has a unitary view while Congress is more deliberative and diverse. So the president can use this power to sway public opinion, sort of bully Congress to certain actions.
An example of how Congress or the president can sway this public opinion would be how the president recently appeared on Zach Galifianakis' Between Two Ferns, where he reached out to the younger population. So although the media can sway this, the president can definitely use this in its favor.
How can Congress check the exercise of presidential power?
Congress has the ability to check any presidential appointments.
In addition, we talked about the Youngstown Sheep and Tube Company versus Sawyer case. From Justice Robert Jackson's concurrence, he sort of created a system that talked about the president's power when he's at his zenith of power, being that Congress and precedence has allowed him to execute his orders efficiently and constitutionally. This is also shown in cases such as Nixon versus U.S. when he was checked for the Watergate scandal.
Congress has a large role in checking executive agreements. An example of this would be President Obama's recent executive agreement with China to lower CO2 emissions. Congress checked this, well, Congress can check any executive agreement by making it go through judicial review, and then they can decide if this is constitutional or not.
Congress also has the ability to conduct oversight over executive branches or executive agencies. Through committees, they can review and analyze how executive agencies have been implementing their policies.
Can you guys explain what an executive order is and how the use of them has increased?
An executive order is an order that a president makes in order to re-emphasize a law that is already put into place.
An example of an executive order would be President Obama's recent executive order on immigration. Orders usually exist within the United States and agreements without, or on the outside of the United States. So with President Obama's agreement or executive order with, in terms of immigration, some say he overstepped his bounds, but really he was just trying to push Congress into having them try to come up with something new.
Yes, as my colleague Mary Alice pointed out, executive orders are often seen as necessary by the president when Congress seems to not be responding to an issue that the public feels should be addressed.
And also, executive orders are derived from a combination of the vesting and take-care clauses in Article 2, and they only apply within the executive branch and executive agencies.
Okay. Compare the powers of the president in foreign affairs with those of Congress in foreign affairs.
The powers of Congress are more formal, while the powers of the president are more implementing policies. The president has the ability to make executive agreements which are not official until ratified by Congress.
Do you believe Congress has ceded too much power to the president in his role as commander-in-chief?
I believe they have. After World War II, Congress has ceded much of its war powers to the president, and they attempted to regain this through the War's Power Resolution. This is simply a resolution, and it has very little enforcement. So the president has the ability to command the army in a lot of ways without congressional approval.
I do not think that they've ceded too much power. I think it's very vital for this United States to have a single executive that can take the action that needs to be taken, especially after 9/11 with the war on terror. President Bush, it was very vital for him to make sure that there was the United States was an influence in other countries.
oftentimes Congress can't respond to certain emergencies as quickly as a president could. So in that, I would agree with my colleague Sophia that Congress does not see too much competence.
Does the role of administrative agencies in the executive branch violate the intent of separation of powers?
It does not violate the intent because while there are administrative agencies, they are, Congress has the ability to conduct oversight over them. For example, recently, Congress, or a congressional committee conducted oversight over the CIA and released documents on interview practices and Guantanamo.
I agree with my colleague Wyatt. I believe that because of the separation of powers being the way that they are and the executive having the ability, as long as that power that is granted to the executive branch is kept there and Congress or the legislative or judicial branches still have the power to check that and they aren't impeded in any way, I think that it is definitely still needed.
Okay, we're done?
10 minutes.
4 more minutes.
We apologize, we only put down our 6 questions. Let us confirm. Okay. Why did the framers believe that an energetic executive was needed?
Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist 10, speaking of this energetic executive, because after coming from the Articles of Confederation, there was such a lack of such an energetic executive that they couldn't address issues such as common domestic uprisings, and he believed that an energetic executive would be much more efficient than a deliberative Congress in implementing policies and addressing national emergencies.
Yes, after going through what the framers have been through as far as Great Britain and the extreme rule, they believed maybe less of a president would be less of power of the president would be the right idea as far as the Articles of Confederation. But I think after that they realized there had to be a balance, and an energetic president would certainly be necessary in some cases.
They also realized that George Washington would definitely be that almost figure that everyone else would fall under. He set so many precedents that later presidents had to abide by almost, except for Roosevelt, of course, who extended his terms. But yeah, an energetic executive is definitely needed in those cases, and George Washington embodies that exactly.
We apologize, those are the follow-up questions that we had.
Are there any questions on our testimony or anything you'd like us to expand on?
It's been an incredible job. And dip into some of the other questions since it's been prepared for those as well. Why did the framers provide that some of the powers of government be reserved to the states?
Because the states are much more closely connected to the people than federal government, it was very important for the states to have enough power to make laws that would be appropriate for the people within their state specifically, since all the states are so diverse.
The framers knew that coming from such a large central government that people would be almost a little scared to have to therefore go into such a strong government. So state governments definitely divide up this power, and like Sophia was saying, it gives people a chance to participate locally, and it gives them a chance to have a say in government that isn't so far away from them.
The framers also recognized the regional diversity of the United States. For example, environmental laws are much different in, say, Arizona than they would be in Alaska, and they wanted to accommodate these state interests.